Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Welcome, everybody. Today I have with me the wonderful Terry Littlefield, who is a yoga and movement teacher based in Los Angeles, but really online, so everywhere. And we're going to talk today about gentle yoga and some of the things that come up with being a gentle yoga teacher, but also people's perceptions of gentle yoga. And I think we're really going to bring the fun to this topic. Terry's business is called Postures, Breath, and Joy, which I love because it spells PB and J. So, Terry, do you want to start with telling us a little bit more about your background and your practice and what you teach?
Sure. Like a lot of people, I think I started with the more air quote exciting yoga, more athletic style yoga. But the whole reason that I began yoga at almost 35 years old, I had never been an athlete, and I have super duper skinny feet, like a very narrow foot. So finding shoes to do a sport or to do hiking or to do anything is kind of a pain in the butt. And someone was like, go to yoga. It's with bare feet. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And so I went and was like, I love it. I can move my body and I'm in bare feet. So no shoes required.
I love that. That was the
And so
first
the journey
thing.
kind of started there.
It started with the
Yeah.
footwear or lack thereof. I love that.
Yes, which I mean, it really does start kind of from the ground up, right? Our foundation with everything. So that is how I got into it. And I used to take a gentle yoga class every Saturday, in addition to the more like I'm trying to do scorpion and I'm cartwheeling across the room, those classes as well. And then I kind of left gentle yoga for a while, and I did my teacher trainings, and then I was offered this gentle yoga position because a teacher was leaving. And I thought, okay, yeah, I mean, I used to love gentle yoga and I should bring it back. And I was really nervous to begin teaching it. And it was a journey because I had to train myself to show up for these people in a completely different way than teaching level one, where I felt like I could be really experimental in level one, but in the gentle, I had to be really honed in and tuned in and be really specific with what I was offering. But I was getting good feedback and learning from my students, right? Because they are the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So they would tell me, that's too hard. That music sounded like a funeral. That's what I got. Friendly funeral. One of my ladies said, that music was like a friendly funeral.
How interesting.
So, yeah. And now, thanks to Zoom, I don't even worry about music. There's no music in the class anymore.
Yeah, we don't have to deal with playlists.
Right? It's really freeing.
It's kind of nice. Yeah.
It is really nice. And I think a good thing for people to focus more on their breath and their bodies and not get distracted by the music. I'm a lover of music, so I would get distracted by the music.
Same here. I have a music background, and it's just like it takes so much of my focus when I'm hearing music in the room. It's like I either want to be listening to the music or teaching the yoga or doing the class. And yeah, the two do not always go together.
Absolutely. And sometimes I do think it is a benefit, but
Mm-hmm.
it can be soothing. It certainly can.
Yeah.
But then that's also a specialty because Are we playing a music that is bringing up something for somebody, that is not a good memory,
Hmm.
or, finding music without words that is not friendly funeral, it's a fine line.
Yeah. Well, what I love about that story is it just, it's an example of how you got feedback from your students, and the music is one
Mhm.
piece of it, but you learned from them like what kinds of movements work for them, what doesn't work for them, and
Yes.
that's how you learn to teach gentle yoga.
Yes. I would pull from the things that I knew, and from the trainings I had learned a lot from Jules Mitchell and Jill Miller, and my teachers that I had at Rising Lotus, Claire and Daniel, and really knew how to take poses and find a different way to do them, right? Like last night I taught tree pose lying down. It's one of my favorite variations of tree pose. Perfect balance, such steadiness, and we're lying on the ground, and the students love that. So I
Hmm.
just could pull from all of that and then get the feedback. And in general, the feedback was there's nothing out there that's gentle. I've taken so many gentle classes, and then I was put in down dog, and then I was put on the Iyengar, the wall ropes, and I'm like, what?
Well, so
So
that brings me to like a fundamental question. And that is, what is gentle yoga? Because I think this is where we run into issues, because it sounds like a simple question, but I found that term is so subjective and people have so
yes,
many different ideas. Like it's a whole spectrum of what people think is gentle yoga. So it's really hard as a student to see that on the class description and know what you're going to get when you go into a class that's called gentle yoga. What How would you describe
yes.
gentle yoga if someone called you up and said, "This is a gentle yoga class, what is that going to look like?"
Well, funny that you ask, because last night a younger person showed up to my gentle class, which I actually have now titled Very Gentle. And I put the very in all caps because I am trying to encourage people to understand that it's not going to have down dog and plank. So I was really excited. This younger person was there because misnomer, myth, it's only for old people, it's only for seniors. So there she was, and I said, "Welcome. I'm so glad to have you. Just so you know, this is a very gentle class. We're not even going to stand up today. We'll be spending all the time on our mats, and sometimes I call this class adult nap time. So feel free to rest whenever you need or want." So I don't have an elevator pitch definition for gentle yoga, but in general, if I do meet someone at the grocery store and I'm like, "Hey, I teach gentle yoga," I would say to them, "You're going to come to a class to fill up your cup.
Hmm.
You're going to slow down. There's time for pause. And we come to gentle yoga to unrush. And there's no down dog and there's no plank." And I say that because those poses scare people.
Yeah.
And they're not scary. They're great poses. They're wonderful poses. But if someone is truly looking for a gentle class, my opinion is that that's not gentle.
I think that's so helpful, and I completely get why you call it very gentle. I was calling class truly gentle for a while, so like we're on
Yes.
the same wavelength, because I've had
Yes.
so many students who came to my class and tried it, and then they said, "Oh, I'm so glad I found this. It was actually gentle, because I've been to gentle yoga classes that I couldn't keep up with, and that were basically
Yes.
like slower vinyasa classes." And I think it's interesting that we have such a wide range of interpretations of what gentle means. And there is also a
Yes.
mindset that yoga is automatically gentle. Like there's an assumption that just
Yes.
because it's yoga, it's gentle, which isn't really true when we talk about planks and chaturangas and down dogs and some of the extended ranges of motion that we are, doing in
Yes.
certain yoga classes. So it's funny and interesting that you have to call your class very gentle for people to understand, for that expectation to be set, that it is going to be this like slow, mellow experience. There's certain things that we won't be doing, and it will still be yoga.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, I'm not ashamed to say that she didn't stay in the class. She left the class. And I was like, okay, 4 agreements. Don't take it personally. That's one of them. And so it wasn't for her, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But I do think when you see it, when you see that title and you sign up for that class, there's so much confusion around it. And the other day, I decided to Google gentle yoga.
Uh-oh.
Yes, uh-oh. So mostly I saw slow flow. It's a slow flow. It's yin. It's restorative. And the poses beside a gentle yoga, like you go to their website, and beside it says gentle yoga class every day at 8:30. And beside that word, that sentence, is a body in a forward fold that like a professional dancer is doing. Perfectly straight legs, the heart resting on the thighs,
Hmm.
the whole thing. And then the other one was with Sukhasana, air quote, easy seated
Hmm.
pose, which is not easy for many people in my
So true.
class. It's not. So I don't even see it represented well in pictures.
I agree.
Yeah, it was just a bummer. So, and I did write down a couple of things that I titled myths myths about gentle yoga.
Yes, let's talk about myths about of gentle yoga, because I think there's quite a few here that actually keep people from benefiting from gentle or enjoying gentle or opening themselves up to the possibility of really enjoying a gentle yoga class. So what have
Yes.
you got?
And well, I kept it to 6. I was just like, pick a reasonable number, Terry, because we could, as you know, go to like 600.
600 myths.
So, yeah, 600 myths.
What are the top
It's going to be
6?
my next blog. So I put, which I just mentioned, it's just slow flow. It's seated meditation.
Hmm.
It's restorative yoga. It's boring. It's for the elderly. It's a waste of time.
Mm. Okay, lots to unpack in there. Well, let's
Mm-hmm.
start with distinguishing gentle from some of the other yoga styles. Like, it's not restorative,
Yes.
it's not yin, it's not vinyasa flow. So, vinyasa flow is like based on sun salutations. And in a gentle
Mm-hmm.
class, do you do any elements of a sun salutation? Is there any part of that?
About about twice a year, I will teach a half sun salutation in the chair.
Hmm.
I will give the option to stand because some people would like to stand and do one, but also I think people teach half sun salutations differently. So
Hmm.
um, for me, it's standing up and reaching your arms up, and then it's a forward fold, and then it's halfway up, and then it's a forward fold, and then it's all the way back up to standing. So
Yeah.
you can do that seated very nicely, and you don't have to fold forward very far at all. Um, I just so yes, but that's literally like twice a year that I include that in the class.
Yeah, I include that sometimes as well, depending on the class. But some of the
Mm-hmm.
issues with it could be, back issues, blood
Yes,
pressure issues, just in the forward folding
yes,
up and down thing. And then the sun
absolutely.
salutation, like it could be wrist issues, shoulder issues, it could be all kinds of stuff that would come up for people in that
Yes,
that sequence.
yes. I also love to give the option, and I do not think that this is a cop out. Like, when someone shows up in your class and they can't do something, in the beginning, you're like, well, just go to child's pose. And you like leave them there for an hour and a half. Sorry, just enjoy child's pose because I have nothing to offer you. Now, I would even say, we're going to do this half sun salutation seated. You can stand if you'd like. Also, you can bring your hands to your heart and you can do it in your mind.
Hmm.
you can physically visualize yourself doing this movement,
Hmm.
which there's research around that is very powerful. It's great for the brain and it can be great for the body as well. So even intending and seeing yourself doing that movement, I think is really neat.
I think that's more inclusive than just banishing someone to a resting pose, like child's pose. And
Yes.
speaking of which, child's pose is really problematic as a resting pose in a gentle class
Yes.
because of the knees, the
Yes.
hips, the ankles, the mobility required
Yes.
to actually be resting in child's pose. Like, I always give an
Absolutely.
alternate option if child's pose is not accessible. So there's these really
Yes.
basic things, like you mentioned, easy pose, the seated, cross-legged, basic seated cross-legged pose. That is really challenging for many people in their hips and their knees and their
Yes.
back. So when we start to teach a gentle class, we really have to think through alternatives to some of these things that are considered
Yes.
really standard in a yoga class.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I see many folks that are doing the another gentle yoga class that I saw online. It's 28 minutes long, and for about 20 minutes of it, they were in sukhasana. They were
Mhm.
seated.
Yeah.
And I thought my class would never do
They would be
this.
dying.
They would be dying. But, it's a younger person
Mhm.
teaching it. And so she's teaching, what she knows.
Mhm.
She's also very popular. So then, if my students were searching for gentle yoga, though, and they saw that, then they would never come to the practice.
Yeah.
I want people to search gentle yoga and be like, you're so welcome. Get in here.
Yeah, and to feel
I
like
have
they
a
can do
million
it.
variations for you. Yes.
You don't
Yes.
wanna title a class "gentle yoga" and then have someone try it and be like, "Oh, I can't even do the gentle yoga," which
Right.
happens.
Right. There's nothing for me. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you brought up yin, and I don't know a lot about it. I told you I want you to be my first yin experience,
You
and
got it.
I am looking forward to that. But yes, it did list yin as gentle yoga, yin and restorative is specifically mentioned.
Yeah, see, I don't know about that because I don't think that yin is always gentle necessarily because, not that the poses are strenuous, because 'cause they're not strenuous, they're restful, but we're holding them
Hmm.
for a long time. So if
Right.
you are not comfortable in that position and you're pushing your body to stay in it for a long time, there's nothing gentle about that.
Right.
So, and the same could
Yes.
potentially be true of restorative, but hopefully in either of those styles, we're approaching it in a way where we do bring in the support we need to be in the pose in a sustainable way and get the benefits from it. But those are passive forms of yoga, right? Those are forms of
Yes.
yoga where we go into a pose and hold it for 3 or 5 or 10 minutes, and that's different than
Yes.
a gentle yoga class, which to me is a movement class. It's a
Yes.
slow-paced, mellow movement class, but it's more dynamic than a restorative or a yin class. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Absolutely 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
And I also have, because I love restorative and I've gone to restorative classes, and I've seen it's really, really hard for people to get comfortable sometimes without 38 bolsters, 6 blocks, 14 blankets, and then they're supposed to stay there for 10 minutes. And if they're new to the practice, then they're afraid to say anything. So they're there and they're not comfortable. So yeah, I think restorative is way different than gentle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I absolutely feel like it falls somewhere between restorative and level 1. I do throw a restorative pose in my class often, and I want to be the person with you and the other gentle yoga teachers out there that clear this mess up. I really want people to say, oh, there's a place for me. I can go to this class.
Yeah. Well, and it's subjective because gentle for a 25-year-old could be different than gentle for a 70-year-old, right?
Right.
We're all in a different
Yes.
stage. but it would be really helpful if we could come to some kind of collective agreement about what is a gentle yoga class, on some
Yes.
baseline level, or at least be attuned to the kinds of options that might need to be given for a gentle class to really be inclusive of everyone who might be drawn to a gentle class.
Yes. And, you know, the younger person, what I'll say about that is I know it is challenging. I tell my gentle students that they're advanced practitioners because being able to slow down and unrush
Hmm.
is an advanced skill these days. And I believe that if you look around at people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and younger and older, we're all rushing, right? We've become so good at rushing.
Hmm.
The pandemic made us like forced stop, but didn't we all manage to still become so busy at home beyond what I could have ever imagined? I'm like, why do I feel so busy? Aren't the people out there writing their novels and making the sourdough bread? Why am I not doing that?
Exactly. I know.
So I think every single person can use this slow down, unrush, tune in. I think it's a valuable practice for everybody. It's not
I
easy.
agree. I wish that my wish is that people will see the value in a gentle class and
Hmm.
not just look at these movement practices for their workout value or their calorie burn or whatever,
Yes.
because that's not the benefit of a gentle class. The benefit of a gentle class is so much more to do with slowing down, regulating your nervous system, giving yourself some
Yes.
space to process mentally and emotionally, unwinding tension out of your body. Like, I could keep going, but um,
Yes.
you had a list of benefits of gentle to share, and I'm really
Yes.
curious to hear what these are and how you would encourage people to think about this.
Okay. Now, in addition to the myths, I did write some truths. I wrote 6 truths to balance out the
I
six
love it.
myths. Should I share
Please
those?
do.
Okay. So these are the truths, the air quote truths. It's sustainable.
Mm,
It's for every age. It's inclusive. There's no experience required. It's non competitive. It's purposeful and playful.
I love it. And no experience required is true, but to me, gentle is also not the same as a beginner class,
I
because I
agree.
think gentle could be like a lifetime practice. And I'm not
Yes.
very interested in these like levels of like progressing through whatever whoever is defined as progress in yoga. For me, it's like
Yes.
just getting on the mat and meeting myself every day. That's it. Like, where's the progress
Beautiful.
hierarchy in that? So, what
Yes.
do you think? Is it
You
different?
have just earned your star. You can move on now to level 89.
Exactly, exactly. And you teach a
Yes.
level one that is different than gentle, right? So,
Yes. Yes. It's a lot more active, and we do all the standing poses and we do planks. And
mhm,
I don't teach a lot of chaturanga, a flow in that way, especially on Zoom, because it's different to see people in little boxes. If I was doing a private, maybe I could because it's a bigger box. But there's a million other things to do to get stronger than, flowing
mhm.
through chaturanga. So yes, we do all kinds of plank things, and it's a definitely more active class. And I have some folks that do like to go to both.
Mhm.
And I also have a friend that is a big gym person. She's super weight trainer, and she would come to my gentle class, and I just loved that she would do that because she's like, this feels so good after this morning doing deadlifts.
Totally.
And I think, yes, what a beautiful recovery. But you see many, many athletes, professional and unprofessional, that only go to vinyasa flow or a super active practice. So I'm like, no, I'm over here. You could really benefit from this practice.
Yeah, I mean, that super athletic kind of class might be more familiar to them because they love that kind of, you know, gym experience or competitive sports experience. But sometimes we need something different. We need to
Yes.
like give our body a break, and the gentle yoga class could be that opportunity.
Yes. Like there's times when I get on the 405 that I want to be in the carpool lane, buzzing right along. I want to be in the fast lane. And there are times when I'm, really enjoying the slow lane or the middle lane where I can, oh, I feel like slowing down. I'm going to go over to the first lane. And I, the movement practice, I would like to see be like that as well. Yoga and movement, where it's not only, all out 100% all the time.
I love that. The yoga of the 405, which is the worst
Yes.
freeway in the history of the world, in my
It is
experience.
the worst.
It's the worst.
It's the worst. I was recently home in Maine where I grew up, and I was driving on the freeway, which they call the highway there, or the
And they
interstate.
don't put a "the" in front of the numbers, right?
Right. No. Well, because there's only one, 95. That's it. So I'm like, oh, yes, I went to 101 to the 405 to the 10 to the 57. No, they don't have that. But I felt so much peace because there was so much space around me. And I thought, oh, this is so different. And here's some gentle yoga right here. There's all this space around me. I can breathe. I'm not in panic mode. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I'm
So,
feeling a similar experience having just moved to Washington State from the LA area, and the highways are really different here. And I'm
yes,
learning not to put the in front of the number
yeah,
when I describe my
absolutely.
route.
So we can give people that small town or more spacious experience in a yoga class.
It's like a retreat from your high speed lifestyle, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I love that.
So the other part, yes, because I made a mnemonic, which
I can't
I'm
wait.
not famous for them, but I do like to make these. So I wrote down something for each letter of gentle, GENTLE, something for each, and trying to narrow it down so that people could say, oh, I'm interested in that, or that speaks to me. So hopefully there's something beneficial here. The G is it gives people permission to slow down, pause, restores resilience in your body, mind, and soul.
G is forgives.
G is forgives.
It's a giver.
E, it is a giver. It is.
I love it.
The first E is enlivens.
Mm,
Enlivens your ability to get to know or remember joy by being more aware of your body, your thoughts, your general goodness.
enlivens. Okay, I like it.
And N is for nurtures your nervous system, more attend and befriend, less fight flight.
Absolutely.
T teaches compassion toward yourself and others, remembering you are not your injury or your cranky back. You are more than that. So teaches. L leaves you feeling calm, centered, rested, and able to navigate life with more presence. And the last E is enhanced awareness on your breath, one of the most powerful tools you can have in your well being toolbox.
Wow, that is so rich. And you really have captured a lot of the true benefits of gentle practice there, from regulating the nervous system to becoming aware of the breath to learning compassion towards ourselves. It's so much more than we can track on our little iPhone
Yes,
watch, right?
yes, yes. And I feel these days, as we're getting more out and about in the world after the pandemic, I'm seeing it. It's actually standing out more to me when someone is kind. And I'm like, that's a bummer. I wish that I would see more of that
Mm,
and less of the short fuses, and
yeah.
people are really frustrated, and there's a lot going on. And so, yes, I think let's have more of this. Let's slow people down and let them get present and learn how to breathe and maybe respond instead of react. And I use these tools. I'm not saying I don't ever react. I have a little secret way, like in the Trader Joe's parking lot. If I get, people are not super friendly there or polite. And if I need to flip somebody off, I do it down below the door. Nobody sees, but I get that like, there you go. But then I'm like, oh yeah, send them some blessings because obviously
They
they
need
need
it.
gentle yoga. They need gentle yoga. So
That's so
yes,
fun.
if we can get people, I'm not perfect at it, but these are tools, really important tools that we can use to be better humans.
I like that. You still have your like recognizing I'm in a moment of reactivity and I'm going to vent that in a
Yes.
way, but I'm not going to do it in a way that affects the other person and continues
Yes.
that cycle of reactivity in the world. So
Yes.
skillful. The secret flip off.
Yes. Secret flip off. Not necessarily proud of it, but it does work.
I
And
think
it
it's
works way
skillful
better than actually flipping somebody off because that is not a good choice.
because that could escalate.
That could.
We don't know where that would lead, but it might not be
Exactly.
good. Yeah, that
Exactly.
is so funny. And then the compassion arises, like you took care of yourself, you had that little moment of recognizing reactivity, and then your compassion for them and empathy for them arises because you recognize, like, oh, we're both in this frustrating situation.
Yes.
And yeah, I can see how that connects to your gentle yoga practice because you develop a habit of feeling into what's going on in the moment and responding to that in your practice rather than imposing an ideal of like what this pose should look like, what this sequence should look like, how I should be
Yes.
compared to the person next to me on the other mat over there. And yeah,
Yes.
can you say more about um, the kinds of things you do teach in a gentle yoga class? Because we talked about some of the things you don't teach, like you don't really do
Mm-hmm.
planks and things like that. Well, what does class look like then? What are we left with? What do we do for an hour in a gentle class?
So I'll use last night's class as an example just because otherwise I could talk for 17 hours. And then I did this, and then sometimes I add this, and it's a lot. But last night our focus was tree pose. And so we start and end class in Shavasana for the gentle class, which I love because people need a moment to let go of the day. Even if they've been home all day,
Hmm.
they need a moment to show up on their mat. So usually 8-ish minutes. We're in, I say Shavasana. They can have their knees bent if that feels better, a position of just being and resting. And then we end with Shavasana. And on Zoom, my Shavasanas have gotten a little shorter. I actually need to go back to I love at least a 10-minute Shavasana. But I give them permission. If you'd like to stay longer and rest, you can,
Hmm.
and just shut the computer off.
I want to touch
So
on that for a
after,
second. I don't want to interrupt you because I
yeah.
do like where you're going, but I feel like mine have gotten shorter too. And partly it's
Mhm.
like I can see people starting to stir because I haven't been
Yes.
talking and they're like, are they worried that they've dropped the signal or like Zoom has crashed or they're like not sure everyone's
Yes,
still there because we're not in the room where we can like sense each other. So I don't
exactly.
know.
I think that's part of it. I know one teacher will say, we're in Shavasana, we're going to be here for about 8 minutes. I'm paying attention to the time. You can let yourself rest. And I haven't been doing that, so that might be a good thing to
That's a good
do.
idea.
But I think they're curious because they're at their home and pre getting my microphone organized, which took a long
This
time.
stuff's not easy.
There was a It's not easy. There was a period of time where I couldn't actually hear students once my microphone was plugged in. So I was teaching, but one lady had decided to like go microwave a snack. And so that all was happening during
She's like
class.
over there
So,
popping popcorn or something. Oh
yes.
my god.
So I think they have their temptations because they're in their
Yeah.
home. And I don't because I'm holding space and teaching a class, but I also just kind of give them a little bit of a break on that.
Yeah.
These times are strange, and maybe she was really hungry and she
We're
needed
all
a
just
snack.
doing the
So,
best we can.
yes, we're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
So,
Well, okay, back to the topic of what you do in a gentle class. You start with a moment of like arriving in a gentle, like Shavasana like posture. Where do you go from
Yes,
there?
we'll do some focused breathing there. Um, just it can be as simple as awareness on the breath, or it can be a body scan, or it might be an alternate nostril breathing, but always giving people permission if it doesn't feel right. We're here to create calm, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
not here to create anxiety. So just observing your breath can be a big step. And then I'll begin moving into some very gentle movements. So, literally, like turning the head left and
Mm-hmm.
right slowly, because you give people a direction and they're like, okay, yes, I'll get this done. Next, what's the next thing? So it's like, be present with your beautiful neck and notice the relationship to your shoulders. And this is good practice, right? For the 405, I may need to turn my head and look at the other lane. So how beautiful is this work?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I knew that I was going to kind of get to tree pose. So I wanted to do some shoulder flexion, getting the arms up and overhead. So we
Mm-hmm.
did some single arm reaching back, options for double at the same time, options for bending the knees for that movement or straightening the legs. And then we went down into the hips and we did some external rotation. Like you could we started with a single leg, so one
Mm-hmm.
leg at a time would go out to the side. It's a bent leg, and then come back up several times so they get that feeling, and the nervous system is like, oh, this movement is safe and comfortable. We're
Mm-hmm.
not trying to get the knee to the floor, we're just
We're
moving.
just seeing what
And
it
we're
feels like for like that bone to move in the
Yes,
hip socket. It
yes,
reminds me of like
yes,
somatics or Feldenkrais or something. You're just getting to
yes,
know a little micro movement, and then you put them together.
yes, yes. And then I put them all together and we end up in a tree pose, and you can put a cushion or something to support the leg if that's better. um, there's always options, always. And after tree pose, then we did, I'm going through my mind through the class. I think we did a supported bridge. So we just put our pelvis on a block or a pillow, usually a pillow. Even though the block is more supportive, the cushion is a little more warm and fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell them, what are you looking for right now? And then we actually took the feet a little wider and let the knees fall together like a tripod leg.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very soothing for the low back, sacrum area. And also, we've been in a lot of external rotation
Mm-hmm.
doing the tree poses and all of that. So I wanted them to kind of have an internal rotation and a pause.
To kind of balance
Through
that out.
most of these movements, I pause. We'll do something and we'll pause and check in with the breath. And what does your hip feel like? Does it feel different than the other hip, which we haven't worked with yet? And then we go on. So always time for retrospection, inquiry, curiosity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I teach in a very similar way in my gentle classes, and it's a lot about taking a pose as inspiration, like a tree or any pose really, and looking at the component parts and sort of deconstructing that to into really micro movements. And you can take it joint by joint and look at what is required
Yes.
and sort of like prepare each part of the body for that. And maybe you culminate in
Yes.
that the classical version of that pose, or maybe you culminate it in a different way, or maybe it's like a totally deconstructed pose that no one even realizes. But like I do that with
Yes.
eagle, like a whole class where we start on our back and we cross one leg over the other, and then maybe we like twist the two legs a few times, or then we start to like hug the arms around the chest, and maybe we
Yes.
rock there. Like it's you just take the like
Love it.
bits and pieces, and you really go into more detail. So I think it makes the practice super interesting, the opposite of boring,
Hmm.
because we
Yes,
go
the
into the
opposite of boring.
subtleties. We're like really looking
Yes.
at each piece of it in a more subtle and nuanced way.
And people have a moment to say, oh, wow, my left hip really felt this way in the movement, and my right hip was a completely different experience. So they're learning about their body,
Mhm.
right? The more aware we are, the more aware we are. And I just think that's huge.
It becomes less about the like end point or the goal of like, I'm going to nail this pose. And it becomes more of like, that pose was a muse, and we could take the pieces of that ideal and just see what applies in our body and what could it bring as insight. What insight could it bring to
Yes.
like how my body works today in this
Yes.
moment.
Yes. And I think just because we're talking about tree pose, you know, in the past for standing tree, it's kind of everyone goes and gets their leg with their arm,
Hmm.
brings the foot all the way up to the inner thigh
Hmm.
because that's what the pose looks like in the magazines. And then when I studied with Jules, she was like, okay, don't use your arm.
Yeah.
Bring your leg up into tree pose without using your arm. And I was like,
Who does that?
excuse me, I can't do that. My muscles were like, no,
Yeah.
you're not doing that. So that gave me some really valuable information
I think I
to
was
do
there
some
that day.
strengthening.
I had that same lesson with Jules.
It's a really good one. It's a really good
It's
one.
really
And so there's
interesting.
none of that. Like, I have to get to that magazine cover variation of the pose. I love that that's not in the gentle class. I tell my students all the time, we are never going to make the cover of Yoga Journal, and let's just three cheers to that. Like,
Yeah. Who
woohoo!
cares?
Although, wouldn't that be nice if they did,
Yeah.
offer that? Like, let's make Shavasana the cover, or fetal pose with pillows. I don't know. Like, I do wish there was some of that, but not always the end range of the pose.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
And, it's so funny. Like we were saying before that we probably have been in the same room for certain workshops in LA over the years, especially with like Jules
Yes.
Mitchell, without knowing
Yes.
it because we hadn't met yet. But that tree pose
Yes.
lesson, like I never thought about tree as a hip pose before that. I thought of it as a balance pose for sure, but I
Uh-huh.
was not
Yes.
really
Yes.
thinking about like that leg that comes up. It has to externally rotate, so the hip is involved. And then when you lift it, if you don't use your hand, you feel your hip flexor engage, you feel the hamstring
Yes.
engage to bring the heel up. I
Yes.
mean, there's like,
Yes.
oh my God,
Yes.
there's a lot going on here that I never would have thought about when I was just in a big rush to like yank my foot up to my thigh and like, ta-da.
Ta-da! Here I am, fancy.
Yeah, and then salute the judges and move on. But
Yes.
it's like it becomes so much more interesting if you can let yourself slow down.
I think so too. And it's just such a life lesson to me. It's just, we would all, I'm just going to say it, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychotherapist, but we would just all be better if we slowed down.
Yeah.
We're in a society of get more, do more, be more. And I think for women, a lot of us have that I'm not enough. I
Mhm.
even deal with that in yoga. I want to do the next training and the next training and the next
Yeah.
training after I've already, I could be a physical therapist with all the training that I've done. But we are enough. And that's another thing I find in gentle yoga, that you get a lot more of that feeling of I am enough, because there's nothing to be air quote successful
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. I love that. That is like a lesson that most of us need to hear 3 times a day. At least.
Yes, at least, at least. Yes.
Yes. I also loved how you talked about the pauses and that space of like silence and letting people have an experience on their own that's not always narrated by you as the teacher, and just kind of like the moment in between poses to reflect and notice, track how you're feeling. I think that's really
Yes.
important, and that's part of what makes it
Yes.
a mindful practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I just lost my train of thought. I was like, "Oh, that's such a good point." I was just on your every word. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so good, Addie." And now I'm like, "What was I going to say?" What's a sign that I was actually doing a good listening exercise without worrying about what I was going to say next? Oh, the pausing. I listen to Tara Brach a lot, and she has all these free podcasts, and they always have a really beautiful message and a lot about being present and the slowing down and being kind and compassionate and all of it. And she one time shared this quote. I won't say it perfectly, but it was about the sacred
Mm,
pause, she calls it. And it's like, if you pause a little, you'll find a little peace. And if you pause more, you will find more peace. And if you pause completely, like you commit to the pause, then you can find absolute peace and tranquility. And I love that, because we can't, this is our problem in society and in culture. And that, going back to I'm not enough, is that what's the next thing? We're on to the
yeah.
next thing. Even in yoga, we're going to do like, you go to class, you sit in sukhasana, you do the meditation, you go down onto your back, you take a gentle twist, you go to cat cow, you go to down dog, you start with Surya A, Surya B, warrior 2. It's the whole thing is nothing wrong with it. It's beautiful, and I love to practice like that sometimes.
Hmm.
I'm not, but it's just go, 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 go.
That makes me think about, the experience as a student of like being in that go, go, go mode, but also when you're the one guiding the class as the teacher, how you kind of hold your ground in the present moment instead of thinking ahead too much in the class. And I'm wondering if you like plan your classes, how much do you plan? How much do you improvise? Like, what does that balance look like for you? And then that's a really tough thing
That's
for
such a
new
good
teachers
question.
too.
It is. It really is. Whenever I talk to new teachers, I'm like, if you're getting overwhelmed or out of, just out of your mind, pause and breathe and teach your students to do that.
Mhm.
You need a breath, and so do they. Trust me. Like, it's not a bad thing. The planning part of class, it's so funny because I studied improv comedy and was an improv actress for several years.
Aha.
And I
That makes
really
sense.
love that. It gave me some really good life skills, and it helps me. I always do bring humor into my classes, just who I am. So I can't really pretend that I'm serious, because I'm not. So um, I just, I used to try to hide that. I'm like, this isn't working. Like, I just have to be me. So when I would teach in person in the studio, I would be able to look around the room more, as we know, and I would have an idea in my mind. Today I'm going to focus on this. Like, this is what I'm teaching, but I wouldn't write down the practice. I would absolutely look and see the bodies, and I would be inspired by them.
Mhm.
And online, that wasn't going so well. In the beginning, I just thought, this is not so good, because the vision is less for the
You're
body.
just not
I'm
getting
not
the same
like,
amount of info from being in the room.
I'm not,
Yeah.
yeah. And some people want to shut their cameras off, and I'm fine with that if you don't want your camera on. So I know that's big controversial material right there. But if you want your camera off, shut your camera off, because you are in charge of your body
Yeah.
and your practice and your home and all of it. Um, so now I have a big whiteboard, and I write down the whole class,
Mhm.
and I have it underneath the computer. And my students know that I have that. And I'm not rigid about it. I'm certainly not like, okay, next we're doing this.
Mhm. Gotta get through that
I
whole
still am
sequence.
open. Yes, yes. I'm still open to what is happening. And maybe there's this teachable moment that happens. And so I stop and I teach something a
Mhm.
little more. But yeah, I plan a lot more.
That's interesting. I feel like I'm doing the same. I'm planning a bit more because of teaching online. And definitely when I record a class that's not like a live class, I totally have a
Yes,
list of what I'm going to do because otherwise I'm
yes,
going to freeze up with the camera pointing at me.
yes,
But it's interesting, I think if you can be somewhat in touch with what you're seeing the students do, you can improvise in a gentle class.
yes,
You can get inspired by something you saw or saw them
yes,
enjoy or saw them struggle with, and you can go down a whole rabbit hole with it. And that takes confidence, I think, as a teacher, of trusting yourself and trusting your students to stay with you if you take them in a different direction.
Yes, it takes so much courage for them to be there. And especially if they're not, not digging on young people, but if they're not, 25 years old and half naked and whatever, it takes so much courage for these, I'll just say like 50 plus,
Hmm.
or women that were not athletes, or they're just afraid of yoga because of the way it's marketed in our world and our culture now. And they show up to you, and that's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
So when I tell them, okay, we're going to try something new right now, you can, watch and see, like, oh yes, I'd like to try that, or maybe not this time. I think it's so beautiful that they're willing to try things. And I thank that to all of my teachers, all of the teachers, because I steal like an artist, right? I've learned from so many smarties, and I just am grateful for all of that knowledge. And I do not think I could teach gentle yoga without this knowledge. And I'll just say that it is not, I don't think it's for new teachers to
I
teach at
agree.
all.
It's actually complex to teach a gentle
Very,
class. And I think it
very.
requires a confidence to be with students who might not be your youngest and most able bodied students.
Hmm.
Although we feel very strongly that gentle yoga is for everyone, including the youngies and the
Yes.
flexies and
Yes,
the
yes. Yes,
athletes.
yes.
I agree.
Please come.
I think it's a pet peeve of mine, as someone who ran a studio, that the gentle yoga class is not to be taught by the newest teacher. I think the most experienced teachers can teach the gentle classes,
Yes,
should teach the gentle classes.
absolutely. And that's been problematic for me, finding subs.
Hmm.
Very, it's just not easy, because people will go in and teach a restorative class, and my students like, we didn't even move, we were just laying there, and they're so mad about that. Or they're like, you know they put us in this back bend or whatever it is, they're not happy with it. So I think, oh gosh, who can I find to sub? And when I went to Maine this summer, they were like, please don't get a sub, just, I made a list of recorded classes, and they could pull from those. So that worked for them, because they're like, just don't get a sub, please, I'm not coming if you get a sub. And I'm like, wow, they're super demanding. Okay, but I respected that, because
Yeah.
they knew. And it's not, I'm sure there are a lot of us out there teaching amazing things, and this is yet another problem. How do we let people know about us? We're out here, folks, we're out here.
Yeah, come find us. But I guess we're
Yes.
gonna have to call our classes very gentle yoga. No, really, for real, gentle. Seriously, it's mellow. Is that too long for a class
Yes,
title?
I think it's perfect. I love it. I'm going to get t-shirts made.
Yeah, I think that's kind of our problem, is like the word has become too generic and people don't know what to expect, and they've maybe had some experiences of classes that were called gentle and they weren't. And yeah, so it's a lot. We're up against it.
We are. And I guess that's a good thing. Like, anything that comes easy, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's a nice challenge, and also, no, I wish just everybody would know about it. And
Yeah.
places that don't have yoga studios or don't have access to teachers, again, I'm like, we're out here. How do we reach those folks? Because they're looking for us.
And we're online now. So it's great
And we're
because, you
online.
can find a teacher that you love and trust, and no matter where they live, you can practice with them at home. And that is one of the silver linings of the last year and a
It
half.
is. It is. I was very surprised. I don't know if you were, but I was very surprised at the level of community created with Zoom.
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be very, at the end you hit the end button, you throw everybody off. And instead, I feel like the community created was
Hmm.
beautiful. we really showed up for each other, chatting before, chatting after.
I love that. I think and it's
Yeah.
more intimate in some ways because you are seeing into people's homes and you're seeing
Yes.
like their environment, you're meeting their pets, and it's kind of warmer in some ways and more intimate.
I love the pets coming to
Me
yoga.
too.
I'm hoping that you haven't been hearing my dogs, but the Chihuahua there's probably a delivery or a mailman or a rodent or a leaf blowing or whatever. She's going crazy out there.
It's gonna take
So,
care of that leaf.
yes, she will get it. She will absolutely get
Well,
it.
it has been such a delight talking to you about this. I feel very validated talking to other gentle yoga teachers, and
Me too. It's
it's so
helpful, it's
helpful. We've
therapeutic.
got to like form community and support each other to get this message out that everyone can benefit from gentle yoga, and gentle yoga is not boring.
That's right. It is not boring.
Anything else you want to
It's
add to
super
this?
fun. I want to just thank people for listening and considering this, and I want to thank you for getting this started, because I know that we need it, and I know that more people will find out about us because of you taking this initiative, which is also beyond courageous. It's we're living in a podcast world, so I'm so excited that you're doing this and bringing information about this practice for
Well,
people.
thank you for being one of my first guests and for the work
Thank
you
you.
do and the humor and grace with which you do it. I love that.
Thank you, Addie.
So, Terry, where can people find you and find your classes and come take your gentle tree pose experience online?
You can find me on my website, which is terrylittlefield.com. And my group classes right now are through a yoga studio, Forward Fold. So you have to pre register for the level 1 or the gentle class, very gentle class.
But it's
And so
online.
that's forwardfold.com.
Okay.
And you just pre register and then you can show up. And if you want to be my guest, please, you can, reach out through my website and talk to me. I can send you the link and you can try out the class. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram, Postures, Breath, and Joy.
I love it.
And YouTube is just my name. But yes, I've got to compete with all the youngsters with social media. But then I'm like, why? Why am I on there? But I am there, and there's some good information for you out
This
there
is how
too.
we find each other.
This is how we find each other. So I'm so grateful, Addie. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you and keep going. Let's bring this gentle yoga out there.
Yes, let's do it. We're on a mission,
Here
folks.
we
Watch out,
come.
because here we come.
Our very quiet revolution is coming gently to your doorstep.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.